Hello, my name is Tucker Johnson, and I am your host today as we experience Nimdzi Live, where we talk about the latest and greatest in translation, localization, internationalization, culturalization, and all that fun stuff global companies need to delight their international customers, or at least not to piss them off too much. On this program, we invite guests who like to have fun and have some value to add for our audience of globalization professionals. I'm always eager to provide a platform to those with a good story or a good data set. So let us know if there are any topics you'd like covered or guests we should reach out to for future episodes. And if you haven't already done so, make sure that you're following or subscribing to Nimdzi Insights on your platform of choice. We are coming to you live today on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, probably. So wherever you're watching, make sure that you're following us, and you will be one of the first people to find out when Nimdzi Insights publishes new industry research or when we schedule new live events like this. Really quickly, before we get into it, upcoming events. Speaking of upcoming events, we have one next week on July 27th with my colleague Yanni Golokovsky, who we're going to be talking about language quality model. She's defined a pretty interesting language quality model, and we published about it on nimdzi.com. So if you are a Nimdzi partner, then you can head on over there and check that out and be ahead of the game on that. Diving right into it, let's get to today's topic. In September 2022, Bolingo Consult published a news website, Econ News. I'm not going to try to pronounce the Tree version of it. They published it in two of the Econ languages, Asante Tree and Fanti. This website is the first online platform that makes available information in the Econ language, enabling speakers of Asante Tree and Fanti to access educative and entertaining content in their mother tongue. In this Nimdzi Live, Adi and Emmanuel, or Clifford, are going to be sharing some lessons from building this website from low resource languages and what it means to constantly create content in these languages. So if you're struggling, if you're running an organization out there and you struggle to find support for low resource languages, this is the podcast for you. We're also going to use this opportunity to share some impressions from Adi and Clifford and feedback from their target readers. A little bit about Bolingo before I let you guys introduce yourselves here. As a female-led organization, Bolingo Consult works with language services buyers in navigating the complexities and localizing for African languages. The company's services range from translation, interpretation, and media localization to creating data for low-resource languages. Bolingo Consult is on a mission to unlock confidence in African languages. And with that, welcome to the show. Oh, and I'm also, of course, joined by my colleague, Renato Beninato, who's tagging along today. So welcome, Renato. Welcome, Adi and Clifford. Did I get everything? Go ahead and introduce yourselves. Adi, you go first, since you're on my right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Taka, and I'm really happy to be here. This is my second time on Nimdzi Live,
Yes.
and really
you were one of the first.
Yeah, so thank you so much. My name is Adi Namaran Kulibali. I am the operations manager of Bolingo Consult. I'm currently joining you from Kigali, Rwanda. And at Bolingo Consult, what we do is to help our clients with African language services, as we know, localization, translation, interpretation. And we also are very much interested in the growth of African languages. And so we've made it our mission to unlock confidence in these languages. And one of the initiatives that we've done is Akan Kasiabo, which we'll discuss later on in this conversation. So that's about it for me. I'll give the floor to Clifford.
Yes, thank you so much, Adi, Taka, and Renato. Great to be here. This is my first time. I don't want to be nervous because I'm a big fan of Nimdzi, also Nimdzi Live. Yesterday I joined the session and it was super amazing. So my name is Emmanuel Clifford Ditia, Business Development Manager at Bolingo Consult. Like Adi said, we are a language service company based in Africa, specifically Ghana, and recently also in Rwanda. I am joining from the Ghana Accra office. Super excited to have this conversation with all of you.
Thank you, Clifford
I'm
and
Renato.
Renato. I'm going to say, Renato, introduce yourself, but also you got the pleasure. I'm jealous.
Yes, not going to
I'm
say.
jealous. It didn't work out for me to be able to join you, but tell us about how your experience with these.
Well, I had the honor and the pleasure to visit Bolingo in Accra late last year. We spent an amazing 3-4 days together. I was hosted with all the treats of a good Ombroni, if I remember correctly. That's what I am.
Gosh.
Yes.
We're going
It's
there.
a foreigner. Nothing negative around it. So I'm a proud Ombroni. But the thing that I'm shocked that you didn't say, Tucker, is that Nimdzi, the name of our company, it's actually an Akan, it's a Fanti word that means knowledge.
Supposedly, that's what I hear.
This is coming back to the origins of the name of the company. And we're going to be talking about the language that, one of the languages that gave origin to the website and the activity that Bolingo is developing, which is unique and extremely useful for all language efforts that we have. And this concept of a low resource language is very relevant. And I think that I'm very curious to see what Adi and Clifford have put together for us in terms of educating us a little bit more about the Akan languages, which are related languages from a certain area. So I'm not going to go into that. But
yeah, don't pretend you're an expert, Renato.
Nimdzi means knowledge, and we're very happy to be, in a way, connected with this concept.
Yeah, so Nimdzi is spiritually African, is what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
I'm gonna, before we get into it, and you guys made my job really easy. You came with like presentation materials and stuff, and I'm gonna bring all that up on screen. But before we get into it, I wanted to take a look at you guys are doing so much. You're doing so much. You've got Bolingo Consult. You've got the Localization Africa. You've got the African LSP podcast. Tell us a little bit about what you do. All of your projects. I'll put Adi on the spot for this one.
All right. Thank you so much, Taka, for that question. So we try to do much based on our understanding of the sector and the industry, and also based on our mission, unlocking confidence in African languages. So the first thing that we actually started doing was the Localization Africa, where we provide localization guides for African countries. So that's one of our initiatives. And then we started with the Africa's LSP podcast also, which is a very exciting podcast where we talk with people in the language industry in Africa to understand what they do, to talk about the languages. I know there is so much that doesn't get talked about, especially in Africa. And so we wanted to start some kind of conversation and engagement, and also to forge connections. So that has been very, very successful with the podcast. And now it's been hosted by Nat Quintela, who is doing an amazing job.
And
then, of course,
that's how I first met you. I think the podcast came across my radar, and I reached out because I was very impressed. Because for us Obronis, the African landscape is a blind spot, right, in our industry, and it's a shame. It really is. And I can say, like, I've been watching you from afar for the last 2-3 years. And I've just been continuously impressed with the content and the initiatives that are coming out of your various initiatives from Bolingo Consult. I know you did the language guides or the country guides for various African countries, which are a super great resource. If anyone's interested in those, reach out to these guys after the podcast. But yeah, sorry to interrupt. I have a bad habit of interrupting people, but I just wanted to say, like, great work that you've been doing. I've been watching you, even though I haven't
Thank you
talked to you
so
for
much.
like a year. I'm watching from
Yeah.
afar.
Well,
Yeah,
and
thank you so
one
much.
of the interesting things, and I think it's very, I was very impressed, is that they're also publishing children's books
Yeah,
that are written by local African authors and published in local African languages. And that one of the challenges in developing countries is having content that is not translated with a Western bias, but is developed and written inside the reality of the African people. So that's something that's really fantastic. Oh, I just saw your screen there an image of that, right, of the book that is in several languages, in several African languages.
Yeah, so the we call it multilingual publishing because we realize that we need a lot of resources in our language, and especially for children. So this is a children's book on the environment. It's written by Zami Christel, and yes, we have it in several African languages. Tree, we have it in Zulu, Arabic, Kiswahili, and so on and so forth. So that's one of our initiatives as well. I don't know if Clifford wants to add up to what I've said already.
Yeah. So I think that is very, very important with the mission that we put for ourselves, that we want to people get confidence in the languages that are on the continent, not just they speaking, but also having materials in the language. And then again, language buyers can also confidently know that, well, if I have my content localized in this language, there will be a lot of benefits from it. And so at both ends, the people themselves having access to the content or whatever materials they need in the languages, and then the confidence that can come from language service buyers to be able to constantly, localize for us, not just also written, but also media localization. These are all things that are really massive in the African continent.
and you're doing all sorts of languages. I saw in the chat there was someone's asking, do you do any Nigerian languages?
Yeah,
Like, how many?
yeah.
There are many, right?
Yes, yes. There are 500 languages in Nigeria, but of course, the
Only.
most popular, yeah, the most popular Igbo, Yoruba,
Hausa.
and so on and so forth. Yeah, Hausa as well.
Well, all right. So I think people get the idea. You're doing a lot of work, but what we want to talk about today is your experience with this new initiative that you have, which is Econ News. I'm sorry, I didn't catch how to say it in Tree, but you came to us with a nice little introduction deck here, and we're gonna get through that. Oh, and by the way, guys, in the comments, you guys got your fan club in the comments because it's a bunch of names that I can't pronounce. So if you guys are watching and you have any questions, comments throughout, I'll be monitoring the comments. Just drop those in there. But yeah, walk us through this here. What are we talking about today?
All right, thank you, Taka. So today we want to talk about Akan Kasiebo, which is a platform for content creation in the Akan language, specifically in Tree and Fanti. And so today we'll give an overview of Ghanaian languages and literacy levels in those languages. And we'll also talk about some features of low resource languages and why we think that these two languages that we are having in Akan News are low resource languages. And then we'll talk briefly about the platform. And then Clifford will go on to share some analytics for the platform, feedback from users, and then we'll talk about the next steps for us with this particular initiative.
Very cool. Yeah, I was reading in your press release that like even in Ghana, a lot of like news channels are presented in the local language, but anything that's written, published online is all in English. And I was surprised to read that this didn't really exist before, having the news. Well, and you know what? Before we get into the presentation, let me do this. Let me bring it up on screen here, because so people can know. It's akan, AKAN news.com. And whoops, wrong. Where is it? Here it is. akannews.com. And here it is. I'll drop a link into the LinkedIn while you guys are chatting, but you can see you can switch here between Fanti and Tree and social media up here. So I'm going to go drop a link for this and turn it back over to you. Sorry for interrupting again. Take it away, Addie.
Yeah. Yeah, so just like you said, Taka, it's quite interesting that you would find that the radio stations where the most listeners, are radio stations that broadcast on Asante Tree, for instance, and those stations themselves, when you go on their website, they are publishing their news in English. That's really interesting. And so we really found it very strange. And we thought, okay, let's just try an initiative to see how it would be, welcomed by the speakers of this language. Because this is a very, very popular language in the country. It has not only high number of speakers, but also high number of people who are literate. That means people who can read and write these particular languages. And so it was really interesting for us to embark on this initiative. And as you can see there, in Ghana, there are high levels of literacy in these languages that we have on the screen in Asante Tree, Equiapim Tree, Mfanti, Nzima, Ga, Dambe, Ewe, Dagbani, Gonja, Degari, Kasem, and Gruni. And this is based on the data from the population and housing census of 2021 in Ghana.
And so these are all Ghanaian languages then?
What did you say?
These are all Ghanaian languages from Ghana specifically?
Exactly.
Okay, awesome.
Exactly, yeah. These are all Ghanaian languages.
All right, next slide.
Yeah, so this next slide actually shows that obviously in Ghana, the official language is English, but aside English, the proportion of people that are literate, 95% are literate in English and a Ghanaian language. So that means that they can read and write English and they can read and write a Ghanaian language. And so that's really interesting as well to really see that we have at least a high number of people who are literate. And with that, usually when we talk about African languages, we talk about speakers of the language, but we don't really place emphasis on literacy, which is very important. And that's what we really wanted to highlight here.
Well, talk to us a little bit about what's the script like? Is it a Latin script? Are there special characters?
Yes, so it uses a Latin script, and there are special characters in the language as well.
Yeah, and was that a barrier to creating something online? Were there font or encoding issues with that? Because I know you mentioned, I think in one of your press releases, that even the professional news sites and other professional sites, when they try to post stuff in local languages, sometimes the characters get mixed up.
I think they have a slide about that.
Oh, I'm okay. Jeez Louise. All right.
You don't have a slide.
I'll just be the slide guy. I'll shut up here.
Okay. Yeah, with regards to the alphabet, sometimes the use of the language, they find it difficult to actually find the correct characters. So that sometimes creates some challenges online because they used the wrong characters for these special characters that are supposed to be used. But it's not really difficult in terms of coding, for instance.
Okay.
So going on to the next slide, we are sharing some data on the Greater Accra region and the Ashanti region. So for the Greater Accra region, for instance, it has over 5 million people, population of 5 million people. And then in terms of people who are literate in Asante Tree, we have 2 million people who can speak Asante, who can read and write in Asante Tree. The interesting thing with the Greater Accra region is that it is native to the Gans. I don't know if you know about the Gan language.
I know it exists, and I know a couple
Exactly.
speakers of it. Don't ask me how to say "where's the toilet" in it.
Yeah, so Greater Accra region is native to the Gans, but you would find that there are people who are literate more in Asante Tree over there, 2 million people. We also have 1.4 million people who are literate in Ghana, and so on and so forth. So that's also an interesting data. Of course, Greater Accra region being the urban center, it's understandable that many people migrate, move to the region to work and engage in other activities. And then the next slide shows some data for the Ashanti region as well.
Before we move on, really quickly, just a point of clarification. In the schools in Accra, for example, because you have all of the people speaking different languages coming from different backgrounds, what is the language of instruction at school?
Okay, so generally the language of instruction is English, but the local languages are taught as courses. So they have courses on the language, and it's basically based on the choice of the school. So a school can decide to teach Asante tree, they can decide to teach Equiapim tree or Ga. So it's actually based on the preference of the school, but the language of instruction itself is English.
Okay. And what is the literacy rate? So you have the literacy rates here for tree and Ga. What's the literacy rate for English?
Yes, the literacy rate for English, I think we we have 80. It's up there. We have 87.9.
I just didn't see it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Which is actually interesting to compare with India, for example, where percentage-wise it's much less than that. They have 22 official languages in India, and I think that fluency in English it's less than 30%, if I'm not mistaken. So
next slide.
Yeah.
Ashanti
so it's
region.
quite high. Yeah, so the literacy rate in English is quite high as well. So yeah, for the Ashanti region, it has a similar population as the Greater Accra region, and undisputed. I mean, Ashanti tree is basically undisputed there. So out of the 4.2 million people who are literate, we have 4 million people who are literate in Ashanti tree in that region. So that's the main region where Ashanti tree comes from, the Ashanti region of Ghana.
Here, and I'm sorry for our podcast listeners because you don't get to see these beautiful graphs, but go check it out on the YouTube channel so you can see it. Here we have figure 4.6, proportion of the population 6 years and older who are literate in Ghanaian language by region. Walk us through this, why don't you?
Yeah, so Ghana has 16 regions, and we've just shared data for 8 regions here. So you can see in the Western region, Fanti is leading. In the Central region, Fanti is leading also as the language in which people are most literate in. In the Greater Accra region, we have Asante Tree leading, followed by Ga. And then in the Volta region, we have Ewe, which is the most the language in which people are most literate in, and the Volta region also shares the border with Togo. The next slide shows similar information for 4 other regions of Ghana, and it shows the languages that people are most literate in, and it also gives us an idea of the languages that people are most literate in general, in Ghana.
And a question here. Are any of these languages mutually intelligible? So can a tree speaker or tree reader understand Fanti, for example?
That's a very interesting question. So, yes, the Akan group of languages, it has Asante tree, it has Equiapim tree, it has Fanti, and it has Nzima as well. So these are languages that are mutually intelligible. Speakers can, to an extent, hear themselves, when they're speaking. So that's an interesting perspective as well.
So now we're getting into it. Features of low resource languages. So getting into the challenges that you face and are facing working on this native language news site.
Yeah, so interestingly, you would find that in Africa, we have several languages that have huge numbers of people who are literate in those languages, huge numbers of speakers, but you will still find that these languages do not have enough resources. Of course, we understand that most often we say those languages are more oral. They are more oral, right, than written, and so that somehow buttresses this point. And so in terms of features of low resource languages, we know that these are languages with limited written materials. There are limited digital resources, limited publications, and in general, there's insufficient documentation, both online and offline.
So
When you compare this, yeah, please go ahead.
so to that point, limited documentation. What do you mean by that? Like, are there dictionaries? Are there standardized spelling? Is there a standard grammatical structure?
Yeah, so when I talk about documentation, it's not only about the resource, I mean, those particular resources with regards to dictionaries and etc. We have those for most of the languages, but we
Okay.
don't have content on various domains or fields. So we don't have content, for instance, on climate change. We don't have content on the SDGs in those languages. And so, in terms of like everyday documentation, that is really missing. And also the capacity of the people to write on the internet, to write in the language on the internet is also an issue. So, yeah, all this creates some kind of lack for these languages, and it prevents the users from actually fully enjoying these languages.
Are these languages available on Wikipedia?
Yes, they are.
And who puts them on there? Is it just crowdsource? Like linguists come in and do that themselves, or is that professionally translated? Maybe that's a Renato question. I don't know. I have no idea how they do localization at Wikipedia.
No.
Yeah, I know usually it's volunteers that they use, right?
Is it?
Renato?
It's all volunteers.
Rationale for aconnews.com.
Yeah, so the rationale is the observation that yes, these languages have high literacy rates. They have high audiences. For instance, people are listening to these radio stations that broadcast in these languages. But on the other hand, you can see that there is a stark absence of written information or content in these languages. And so, really, it's about making efforts to raise the profile of these languages online, so that we don't just remain with this narrative of oh, these languages are mostly oral and stuff like that. So.
And yeah, so the idea behind it. So I'm going to play devil's advocate, right? And I'm going to ask, like, if most people can understand and 87% literacy rate even read English, then it's not a requirement for people to get their news in the native language. What is the driving? Is there a fear that these languages are going to go extinct or just not be in use anymore? Or talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so basically, when a language is not being used, it doesn't evolve, right? We don't get new content for the language. We don't create new words. When you take Kiswahili, for instance, there were deliberate efforts by the government and stakeholders to ensure that the language grows and expands to what it is currently. And so the fear for these languages is that if we don't create content for them, they might go extinct, and it's very serious, because there's so much knowledge. Aside that, there's also a lot of knowledge in those languages that we need to be able to retain, and it's not every concept that we can actually explain in English. I mean, for those people that speak the language, they know when you are saying something in the language, it's sometimes so deep that you can't exactly translate it into English, and so that particular knowledge, we need to keep it within the language, and we need to ensure that the language, exists.
Let's go to the next slide here. All right, getting into it. I kind of stole your thunder a little bit by showing the website, but tell us about the website. And then I have some questions about the website too.
All right, Clifford, do you want to take over?
Yeah, so thank you, Adi. I think I really like the last response about the fact that there's a lot of knowledge in these languages that we need to protect. Personally, being a camp person and speaking Twi, I speak Twi very well. Even this presentation, I can make everything in the language. There are certain things that you can say in the language that sometimes it's difficult. I mean, you don't know how to actually get it into English. And so those kind of sayings and the knowledge also carry a lot of weight and creativity and all that I think really needs to be preserved and protected.
And for the record, I agree. I see a LinkedIn user is challenging me, as you should, saying, "Imagine your English content wasn't available on websites," and that's why I said I'm going to play devil's advocate, right? Like I agree with all of this. I just think it's a really interesting conversation, and it's an interesting conversation that people need to hear because unless you're even people in the localization industry that have been around for a long time and translating, if they've never worked on projects or initiatives with low resource languages, a lot of us don't even understand the nuances and the subtle reasons for why they're why it's important to keep these languages alive.
Yeah. And so if you look at the various domains and articles that we put out on a daily basis. So we write every day. So every day we have content creators that have signed up to write various articles. And most of the articles are also timeless. So it means that they are daily issues and they touch on very important domains. So from health to issues around democracy and politics. And just recently, technology, I've seen the Fanti people are writing a lot about technology, even writing about Twitter and Thread that recently came out. And so that gives you the idea of how extensive the language is and how rich you can talk about a lot of issues in the language. Sometimes there's a whole mood about, oh, there's, limited words, you can't say this or that in the language. So these are things that for us, we are super proud of the writers. They put in a lot of effort to bring in very, very rich content that cut across various domains as well. So maybe we can look at the next slide.
On it.
Yes.
Cool.
So
516 articles. How long have you all been doing this?
This is actually by September we will be 1 year.
Okay, but still,
so
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Once again, sorry. Please explain this graphic on before I interrupt again.
Yeah. So the platform has basically two main varieties of the account language. So we have the Asante and Fanti. So far, as at June 30th, that's when we extracted this data. And so we have in total 516 articles, distributed across the various variety. On average, we have about 1,500 words per article. So that is the average. Some can go as long as 3,000 words. If you look at some of the articles are very lengthy. Some can also be around 1,800, but a lot of them hover around 1,500 words. And so that should tell you that if you do the mathematics, we are having over 774,000 words of these languages, the account languages on the platform. When we started, the target was, okay, by the time we are 1 year, we should produce enough articles that can give us about 1 million words. And hopefully, probably we'll be able to achieve that. Maybe we have some few months to go, but that is what we have at the moment.
Is there a component of why are you targeting word count? I should say it seems like an unorthodox method or a goal to set for yourself. Why word count?
Yeah, so I believe all the reasons that we have given, from protecting the resources in the languages, protecting the language profile on the internet, and so on and so forth. There is also issues of data that is very important.
That's where I was getting at, yeah.
Yeah, in all these conversations. And so recently, we've been approached by an organization that wanted some data to train their machine translation software. So we had a conversation, and unfortunately we were not able to agree on how to move forward. But that is the magnitude of the work that we are doing. That we are protecting the languages, we are ensuring that people have access to content in their languages, but then also we are creating a lot of data in these languages.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest challenges about like developing machine translation solutions, for example, for these languages. There's just not enough. There's not enough of it out there for everybody.
Yeah.
So top viewed pages and average time spent.
Yeah, the rationale for this particular slide was very fascinating to see that people spend a lot of time on various articles, so they don't just brush through. So you can see as high as 10 minutes average time that is spent on a particular article. I mean, so for us, it was, when we saw this data, we were super happy that there's a lot of time that is spent on the platform. So people don't just open and close it, they just spend a lot of time reading, digesting, and even sharing the content.
Yeah. And for those viewers out there who have never seen analytics for a publication-based website, like, it's brutal. People don't hang out on pages very long. So 10 minutes is a long time for someone to be digesting some content. Traffic for Asante Tree.
Yeah, so this is kind of obvious data, but also very interesting because we have the various locations, and then of course also the devices that people use to access the platform. So you see many people use their mobile phone as compared to tablet or desktop. So actually it's not surprising. And of course also you get a lot of people that are actually accessing the platform from Ghana. But substantially you can see the United States and other countries also there. And then the channels that they use to get in, most of them are direct searches and direct clicks that they use to come in. So yeah.
Yeah, this is real interesting. The mobile doesn't surprise me because everyone's on mobile these days.
Yeah.
But this is really interesting that about 61% are accessing from Ghana, and then the rest from outside of Ghana. And I imagine that the percentages kind of mirror the diaspora of Ghanaians in the world. And I know, living in a foreign country before, just how refreshing it was to have access to my language, right? And I'm an English speaker, so it's easy for me to get access to my language. But I can only imagine how challenging that would be to, be a Tree speaker and living in the U.S., especially if you're in a small town with no Ghanaian community surrounding you. You could go weeks without seeing or hearing your languages, right? Is it the same for you, Renato, in Brazil? When you read the news back home?
I start my day by reading the local news in Rio de Janeiro, especially looking at the sports scores. And for the first time in almost 20 years, my team is in the first place in the Brazilian National Soccer Championship, so I'm very happy. And it gets me motivated to go. But it's refreshing. You're absolutely right. It's the best thing in the world is to go and read stuff in your own language about your own country and your own stuff. So, and actually, what is the top topic that people read on Akan News? Is it politics, sports, gossip, food?
That's a good question. I'm afraid to ask any more questions because every time I ask a question, it's like, well, we have a slide for that. So, but that's a good question.
No, we don't have slide for this particular question. I think that most readers have been following exactly what the content creators are putting out there. And so if you look at it, some of the top ones that people really consume has to be around history. So there are, if you look at Asante, there are articles around some, kings and chiefs, the history of Ghana, and so on and so forth. Recently, in Fanti, one of the writers has consistently been producing articles in the independence, history around independence of various countries in Africa. And that has been really, really been accepted. Get a lot of tractions. And so history kind of stand tall when you look at the various.
Well, and if you look at modern African history, it's very recent, right? But we're already in those generations that don't remember anymore. I'm from a generation that I remember still reading in the news and watching on TV a new African country got independence from the UK, from France, and so on. This happens in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But now there are generations like you guys who were born after that, and you don't remember that. So you need to go back to history and what were the conditions that caused that, and try to understand where society is, where it is, and what brought it there. It's fascinating that, and it makes me rejoice at the fact that people are interested in their history origins and where their situation is.
Yeah. And one other interesting part as part of there is a portion where people also search items, and we are able to collect data on that. And a lot of people also search. We've seen the data that has come for Asante. The searches has been around traditional religion, and then a bit around politics. So there's also that interest. People go there and they just search something about politics or religion. And they just want to find out if we have some articles in those that one as well.
Excellent. The topics that you're not supposed to talk in polite company here in the United States. Politics, religion, and sex.
This is why I don't invite you on the podcast anymore, Renato. All right.
Well, that's what people are curious about. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And do you have any plans to include, because one of the things that fascinated me about Ghana is how musical the country is, how musical people are, and we had a chance to go to a restaurant when there was a celebration for some local woman who was turning 80, and it was such a beautiful party and music and everybody dancing and singing and so on. Do you have an entertainment section in your news?
Yeah, actually, there's the entertainment part of it. That especially for Fanti, there's one of the writers write a lot about sports and entertainment. He is a sports person. He's already doing his master's in Fanti, but he likes sports, and so he really combined what he's learning to what he's very interested in. And so for him, he's always excited about this opportunity to write because he likes the sport aspect, and then he knows the language. So it goes well for him.
So how much of it is volunteer work? You know that some of Bolingo's employees are contributors to the content. You yourself write for the website. And you have how many contributors, and are they mostly volunteers? Are they employees? What is the structure of this?
That's a great question. And did you want to respond? I should go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead, Clifford.
Okay, thank you. So we have about currently 8 contributors distributed across the 2 languages. So we have 4 for Asante Creek, 4 for Fanti. They are not volunteers because they definitely need to buy data, they need to do some research, and they do a lot of research. And so we have agreed on a rate with them that we pay them. And so much of our marketing budgets, we put it in this one to support them so that constantly we ride. And so that has been the approach. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question.
Yes, absolutely. And have you been able to sell advertisement on the website?
No. So most of the banners that you see are internal banners that's for ourselves. But one interesting thing is
Renato's trying to steal notes for Multilingual magazine, is what he's trying to do. He's trying to steal your ideas. I know exactly what he's doing, but please go on.
Yeah, so a lot of people have reached out to us through the platform. They go, they saw account news, and then they go to the footer, they go, which organization is behind this? And then they see Bolingo Consult. And then they reach out, and then they ask, why are you doing this? What is it? And then they are able to also inquire our services and what we do. And for us, that is really. So there's that kind of element of visibility for Bolingo Consult itself in the midst of the account news platform.
All right, let's go back to the slides here before we get too far off track. We got the same traffic for Fanti. Little bit different here. I don't have a key here, but is there any difference? Did you notice any difference between the Fanti and the tree traffic to the website?
I think they are almost the same.
Yeah.
They are virtually the same.
It kind of looks like it.
Yeah.
But what are users saying about Account News? I know we kind of got into it, but give us some examples here.
Yeah,
I can give you examples from the chat. Like I said, you brought your fan club with you today, and there's a lot of people. I saw someone saying, like, "Oh, I want to do this for Nigerian languages." It's very, very well received. If the chat is any indicator, it's being very well received.
I mean, the same impression from many people that we've interacted with, including the Ghana Bureau of Languages. So, the Ghana Bureau of Languages had opportunity to, they've seen it, and I had a meeting with them, their head of Asante P and account department. We spoke for a very long time. They wanted to find out, I mean, how do we do that? Because they find it very lofty and very far away, and this is something that we've been able to implement within very easily. And so, we explained to them, and they were extremely happy about the fact that we are helping the languages to stand. So across the board, you get very positive feedback, positive energy from all the people that have had opportunity to see it. There are other people that also find it very, but their main issue is the fact that why are we doing just Akan and not their language? So they are
Right.
so the other Ghanaian languages, why are you promoting Akan alone? When are you adding Ewe? When are you adding Ga? So,
you got to start somewhere, right?
Exactly.
I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't want to bring that up, but since you brought it up, that's always the challenge when going into these things, because you have to start somewhere. And with so many languages, what is Ghana have? How many languages are just in Ghana? It's like
about
80,
50,
right? 50?
Yeah.
I mean, that would break the website, right? So, but
Also, you
are
need the
there
people,
plans?
you need the resources, you need the stories. Yeah. It takes time, and this is a bootstrapped initiative, and it's the challenge, and it's a very different structure in language, and they have sounds with words with specific characters and so on. You need to develop that. But hey, yeah, maybe somebody else has an idea to do something similar, and you partner and you share your experience and so on, which is very good. Do you translate any articles from Asante, from Twi to Fancy, or vice versa?
No.
Okay.
If I can answer that, no, we don't translate. All the articles are original, like original articles on their own. But Clifford, you can jump in.
Yeah, so I have actually asked this question from the creators before, if they take a cue from, because they can actually read both languages. Just that they can write one, but they can read both languages. But once they don't. They always want to create from scratch and be a bit unique.
Awesome.
I'd be interested, do your analytics show, are the same users reading both languages? Or do you see one set of users looking at the tree and a different set of users looking at the Fanti? Or is there cross-pollination where, because it's mutually intelligible, people are reading both?
Well, it's possible that if someone visits, especially the homepage for Asante Tree, they go there and they may switch to Fanti. But if you look at how the languages are, people really, stay within a particular domain, and that is the kind of experience. So if you look at the analytics for Asante Tree, it's just a group of people in Ashanti region and some part of Greater Accra that are interested in that. The same thing for Fanti, you see Central region, Western region, and some a bit of Greater Accra as well that are very interested in the Fanti.
And a question I should have started with: what are your guys's, you, Adi and Clifford? What are your first languages?
Yeah, so I can start with me.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I have a very interesting background. I have a blend of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. And so from Cote d'Ivoire, I speak Dula.
Yeah.
And then from Ghana, when I came to Ghana, I studied Tree in school. So I can read and write Tree. So I've kind of adopted it as my language. So that's what I can say.
That's why I knew the answer to that question. That's why I'm asking, because I think it's fascinating that you're doing this for Fanti and Tree, and it's not even your mother tongue. You're not even originally born in Ghana. So I think that's extra special. And Clifford?
Yeah, for Clifford, it is. I mean, Clifford
I am a Asante Tree.
You're
person.
boring. All right, never mind.
But the interesting point that I want to make here is that because I schooled in the Western region and I studied Fanti in school. So in my school, I studied Fanti, so I can read Fanti as well. But at home, church, and other places, it was just strictly Asante Tree. When I read the Fanti, you can clearly hear that I'm not a native speaker. It's just I'm struggling a lot.
Nice. Let's see. Do we have more slides here?
But the question that you didn't ask is, what language do you speak between the two of you?
Oh, that is a good question.
we to answer. I mean, we always speak Asante Tree. Like Clifford is always insisting on Asante Tree. So yeah, I mean, it's always in my ears. I don't have a choice. So
Well,
I'm enjoying it.
Asante Tree is kind of the lingua franca of Accra. Am I correct in that? Like most people speak it. Like in the market, you're going to hear it a lot. And like what I've observed in my very limited experience is like that's the African language they use to, even if they're not Tree, right? Speakers.
Yeah, that's interesting. But most people in Ghana, when you say those things, they are not happy because they'll be like,
"Oh, I'm pissing all sorts of people off today." Like I know, I'm not doing it intentionally. I'm doing it with it's a place of ignorance, let's say.
Yeah, because people begin to think that there is a dominance of Akan, and even, I mean, the natives of the Greater Accra region will begin to complain that we are the natives, but our language. Recently, there was a debate about they not being able to open a radio station in their language, and so it's quite interesting. But yes, Asante tree is very popular on the streets of Accra.
Well, on that note, I mean, if I really want to piss people off, I'm going to read the comment that I just saw here. Someone made a comment just about that. Let me find it. Talking about the resourcing. Yeah, Nat. Hey. And you equally need very good resource persons in all of these languages. Coming from someone who isn't a Khan, I have to be honest and say that Akans are making very good strides in learning and promoting their languages as compared to other languages. So, hey, I did not say that. That was in the comments, just for the record, everybody. Oh, all right. Last slide. Next steps with creating content in lower resource languages. Platform for written content in African languages. What are we talking about, Emmanuel? Or Adi, Clifford?
Yeah, so we are looking at, I mean, there have been a lot of ways of thinking about this initiative and how we can monetize, you know.
Well, that's what I was going to ask too, because my capitalist brain immediately goes to like, all right, when are you going to start monetizing this and how, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. I didn't want to ask because I don't want to put you on the spot. So I'm glad you're bringing this up because I'm interested.
Yeah. And if you look at the content that currently are being created, these are very, very educative content.
It's great. Yeah, it's great.
People write about health issues and very extensive. When they are writing about history, it's very extensive. And so we look at how we can, you know, blend these languages that, you know, in Ghana and West Africa, where it's not really popular in written, with languages in East Africa, where there's a lot of popularity in its use, documentation, and if you compare the two types of languages. So blending them, having a platform where educative content could be created in a more of not as a news platform, but as a learning platform for people to get access to some information. If it is around government initiative, it's about some policy, local government policies, and so on and so forth. So that can help to do that. And so we are thinking about that, and that is what will be probably the next step of Akan News itself. Adi, maybe you want to add something, or I've missed something.
Yeah, so to add up to that, I mean, there is a clear distinction between, when you come to East Africa, there is a clear distinction and difference in the way they use their languages compared to West Africa. In West Africa, we have, you know, African languages that are widely spoken and people are literate in, but they don't have the kind of platform and visibility that when you compare to the East African languages they have. For instance, here in Rwanda, they have news websites in Kinyarwanda, and people are able to read the news in their language. And I find it so fascinating. I'm sure for those of us from West Africa, it's still kind of a remote concept, you know. So it's something that we want to try to make people get used to. And so having a platform that creates content in African languages, especially those languages that are spoken a lot but not written, would be an ideal thing to do. And so, yes, it's something we're looking forward to do and contemplating about how to go about it. We've already launched some questionnaires and we've had very interesting responses about what people would like. And so, yes, we are looking forward to that next stage.
Yeah, I mean, you use the word platform. This is a prototype for it. You're blazing a trail for other people to follow. And whether your website ends up in 50 languages or not, you're setting a precedent and an example for other people to follow here. So, excellent. And to respond to your comment there, Oscar, yes, I do like to stir the pot with those questions. You guys aren't looking at the comments.
But I think, just before we wrap, I think that it's commendable that you have, with essentially 8 people generated close to 1 million words of content by yourselves, without any sponsorship, without any government money, without any
Chat GPT
and so on, without Chat GPT. Exactly. So good job. This is fascinating. I already knew about it, and fascinating. But I think we should get them to sing something. Clifford is a good singer. He should sing something in Fante.
Once again, this is why I don't invite you on more podcasts, Renato. Don't worry, Clifford. I ain't going to do that to you. Adi, Clifford.
We should hear Fante or Tree before.
Ghana's got good music, people. Go Spotify that yourself. Adi, Clifford, and kind of Renato, it's been a pleasure to talk to y'all today. Thank you for coming back on the show. You have a platform anytime you want with Nimdzi Multilingual. I really respect the work that you're doing. So I want everybody to hear about it. So with that, I'm gonna wrap it up here. You guys can stick around. We can chat a little bit afterwards. But once again, everybody, my name is Tucker Johnson. I hope you have enjoyed this Nimdzi Live experience. You can join us next time on July 27th when I'll be talking to my colleague, Yanni Golikovsky, about her interesting takes on language quality models. I appreciate our guests today, Adi and Clifford from Bolingo Consult. I appreciate my colleagues here at Nimdzi Insights doing all the hard work so I can have these fun conversations. I even appreciate Renato most of the time. I appreciate everybody in our industry who fills out our surveys and schedules briefings with us so we can include you in industry research. And lastly, I appreciate you, the audience, joining us live today, all of the dialogue in chat. And I will see you next time. Cheers.